12 men have walked on the moon. 12 human beings have stood on that barren gray surface, looked up at Earth hanging in the black sky, and experienced something the rest of us can only imagine. They came back heroes. They gave interviews, wrote books, appeared at schools and museums. They told us about the science, the mission objectives, the technical achievements. But there was always something they did not talk about. Something in their eyes when the questions got too personal. Something in the way they would pause before answering when asked what it was really like. For decades, the official story was enough. The moon was exactly what we expected, a dead rock cratered in gray. Scientifically interesting, but ultimately barren. The astronauts saw what the cameras showed us, nothing more. Charles Duke was the 10th man to walk on the moon. As the lunar module pilot for Apollo 16 in April 1972, he spent over 20 hours on the lunar surface driving the lunar rover across the Descartes Highlands, collecting rocks, conducting experiments. He was 36 years old, a test pilot, a family man, a by-the-book astronaut who followed procedures and completed his mission flawlessly. The NASA reports say he and Mission Commander John Young accomplished every objective. The scientific community praised the geological samples they brought back. The mission was considered one of the most successful of the entire Apollo program. But something happened to Charles Duke on the moon. Something that took him 40 years to talk about openly. Something that NASA never mentioned in any official report. Something that even now, at 89 years old, he struggles to put into words. In recent interviews, Duke has finally started revealing what he actually experienced during those 71 hours on the lunar surface. And what he's saying doesn't match the official narrative. It doesn't match what he told reporters in 1972. It doesn't match what's in any textbook. According to Charles Duke, the moon is not what we've been told. And what he saw there changed everything he thought he knew about our place in the universe. This is his story, the real story, the one he couldn't tell until now. Charles Duke grew up in South Carolina, the son of a naval officer. He was fascinated by flight from childhood, earning his pilot's license while still in high school. He attended the Naval Academy, then became an Air Force pilot, then a test pilot, the traditional path for astronauts. In the 1960s, Duke was recruited into the astronaut program in 1966 as part of the 5th group selected by NASA. He was known for being calm under pressure, technically brilliant, and utterly reliable. These were not cowboys looking for adventure. These were engineers and test pilots who understood complex systems and followed protocols exactly. Duke's first major role was as Capcom, the capsule communicator for Apollo 11. His was the voice from Houston that Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin heard during the first moon landing. On the radio, he said, "Roger, tranquility. We copy you on the ground. You got a bunch of guys about to turn blue. We're breathing again. Thanks a lot." That was Duke. Calm, professional, focused on the mission. 3 years later, he got his own chance. Apollo 16 launched on April 16, 1972. Duke, along with Commander John Young and Command Module pilot Ken Mattingly, spent 11 days in space. Duke and Young spent 71 hours on the moon itself, longer than any previous mission. The official objectives were scientific. They were to explore the Descartes Highlands, collect samples from what geologists thought might be volcanic terrain, test new equipment, and conduct experiments. Everything was planned to the minute. Everything had a purpose. Everything was designed to advance human knowledge of the moon. And they accomplished it all. The mission was perfect by the numbers. But if you watch the footage from Apollo 16, if you really watch it, you can see something odd. There are moments where Duke stops, just stops moving, stands completely still, staring at something off camera. Young's voice comes over the radio. "Charlie, you okay?" Duke responds, but there's a delay, a hesitation. Yeah, I'm fine, just looking." Looking at what? The official transcripts don't say. The mission reports don't mention it. And for 40 years, neither did Duke. When Apollo 16 splashed down on April 27, 1972, Duke and his crewmates were treated as heroes. They took part in ticker-tape parades, a White House visit, and a world tour. Duke gave hundreds of interviews, and he spoke about the technical aspects of the mission, the geology, the experiments, the feeling of reduced gravity, and the beauty of Earth seen from space. But he never talked about what he saw, the unspoken things that were not in any mission plan, the experiences that did not fit the scientific framework NASA was presenting to the world. Years passed. Duke left NASA in 1975. He became a businessman and a speaker. And he was a devout Christian who spoke about how his faith had been affected by seeing Earth from space. He was open about his life, his struggles, and his beliefs. So Duke stayed quiet. He gave safe interviews about safe topics. He let people believe the official story. Until recently. The change started around 2015 when Duke was in his 80s. He began giving interviews that went beyond the standard Apollo story. He started using a different language, talking about things he had carefully avoided for decades. He talked about the light being wrong, not just different, wrong. Sunlight on the moon should be pure white, maybe slightly yellow, Duke said. No atmosphere to scatter it, basic physics. But sometimes when I looked in certain directions, I'd see colors that shouldn't be there. Blues, purples, not reflections. The light itself was colored, and it would shift. I'd look away and look back, and it would be different. He talked about sounds. You can't hear anything on the moon. No air, no sound transmission. We knew that. But I heard things. Not through the radio, not mechanical sounds from the suit. I heard tones, frequencies, sometimes harmonic, sometimes discordant. I asked John if he heard it. He did. We both did. But we didn't report it because it was impossible. He talked about the feeling of being watched. Every astronaut who walked on the moon will tell you the same thing if they're honest. You feel observed. Not by Houston, that's different. You feel like there's a tension on you, presence, awareness, not threatening, but enormous, like standing in front of something vast that's paying attention to you. Duke described moments where time seemed to behave strangely. We had strict schedules, every minute accounted for, but there were periods where I'd be working, focused on a task, and suddenly realize that, according to my suit timer, 20 minutes had passed, but it felt like 2 minutes. Or the reverse. A task that should take 5 minutes would feel like an hour. John experienced it too. We'd compare notes, and our subjective time didn't match the clock, ever. These were not the reminiscences of a confused old man. Duke was specific, detailed, consistent across multiple interviews, and he was not alone. In 2017, Duke attended a private reunion of Apollo astronauts, one of the few times most of the surviving moonwalkers were together. According to Duke, they had a conversation they had never had publicly about what they had actually experienced. Everyone had anomalies, Duke said later. Different things for different missions, but nobody's experience matched what NASA told the public. And we all knew we could not talk about it. Not because NASA threatened us, they did not, but because we knew nobody would believe us, or worse, they would think we were crazy. So we kept quiet, all of us. But Duke, now in his late 80s, had decided he was done keeping quiet. The most significant revelation came in a 2019 interview when Duke was 84. The interviewer asked him directly, "Did you see anything on the moon that NASA has not acknowledged?" Duke replied, "Yes, absolutely yes." The interviewer asked, "What did you see?" There was a long pause. Then Duke said, "Structures, not natural formations, not rocks, happen to look geometric. Structures, artificial, old, very old." The interviewer, clearly shocked, asked where. Duke said, "In the highlands. We were on the far side of a ridge out of direct view from Earth. We had driven the rover about 6 kilometers from the lunar module. We were supposed to be collecting samples from a specific crater, but I saw something on the horizon. Geometric, too regular to be natural. I called it out to John. He saw it too." The interviewer asked, "What did you do?" Duke said, "We drove closer. It was not on our planned route, but we had some discretion. As we got nearer, we could see it more clearly. It looked like a wall or a foundation, angular, made of blocks, covered in dust, but definitely constructed, maybe 100 meters long, extending into the lunar surface at both ends, as if we were seeing part of something larger. The interviewer asked, "Did you report it?" Duke said, "We tried. We called Houston and described what we were seeing. There was a long delay. Then we were told to continue with our planned sample collection. No acknowledgement of what we had reported, no request for photos, nothing. We were experienced enough to understand they did not want us pursuing it." The interviewer asked, "But you took photos anyway?" Duke said, "Of course, we took dozens. Close-ups, context shots, everything. They were all on the film we brought back." The interviewer asked, "And?" Duke said, "Those photos were never released. Not to the public, not to the scientific community. I have asked NASA about them multiple times over the years. I am always told they are classified for technical reasons, or they were lost, or they were too poor quality to release. But I took those photos. They were perfectly clear, and they showed exactly what we saw: artificial structures on the moon." This was not the most explosive claim Duke made. The most explosive came when the interviewer asked if the structures looked recent. Duke replied, "No, that is the thing. They looked ancient, eroded, even though there is no weather on the moon. Covered in impact craters, which meant they had been there for a very long time, millions of years possibly. They predated anything humans have built. They predated humans. The implications hung in the air." The interviewer finally asked, "So who built them?" Duke said, "I do not know. That is what makes this so difficult. I do not know, but someone or something built structures on the moon long before we got there, and NASA knows about it, and they have decided the public should not." After this interview, Duke faced exactly what he'd feared for decades: mockery and dismissal. Mainstream media largely ignored his claims. Skeptics said he was misremembering, seeking attention, or suffering from age-related confusion. But Duke did not recant. Instead, he provided more details.
He described other anomalies, areas where the lunar dust seemed to have been disturbed recently, too recently, trails or paths that suggested movement across the surface, glints of metal or glass in crater walls that did not match any known lunar geology. He talked about the way certain areas felt different. You'd cross an invisible boundary and the sense of presence would intensify or disappear completely. Like walking through rooms in a house, each one has a different feeling, even though it's all the same structure. Presence. Duke mentioned radio interference that did not match any known source. Brief transmissions on frequencies that should not have had any traffic. We would hear bursts of sound, not voices, not mechanical, almost musical. NASA said it was probably reflections from Earth broadcasts, but we were on the far side of the moon. Nothing from Earth should reach that far. He described moments of what he called clarity. A few times, usually when I was alone, away from John, I would suddenly understand things, not thoughts in words, just knowledge about the moon, about its history, about why we were there. And then it would fade, and I could not hold on to it. But in those moments, I absolutely knew we were being allowed to be there, that we were guests, that the moon was not empty and never had been. These claims sound extraordinary. They sound like science fiction, but they were coming from a man with impeccable credentials, an Air Force brigadier general, a test pilot with thousands of flight hours, an astronaut who performed flawlessly on one of history's most complex missions, a man known throughout his career for being rational, skeptical, and utterly honest. Was Charles Duke losing his mind, or was he finally telling a truth he had been forced to hide for 40 years? The question became more complicated when other astronauts started making similar admissions. Buzz Aldrin, in a 2018 interview, mentioned monoliths on Mars's moon Phobos and suggested people should want to know what put them there. Edgar Mitchell had spoken for years about government knowledge of extraterrestrial intelligence. Al Worden, Apollo 15's command module pilot, stated publicly that he believed humans were descendants of ancient aliens. These were not fringe figures. These were men who had been to space, who had seen things the rest of us have not, who had been trusted with billion-dollar missions and who had performed flawlessly. And in their later years, free from NASA employment, no longer concerned with careers or reputations, they were all saying the same thing. The official story is incomplete. What they experienced in space did not match what they were allowed to say publicly. There are things about the moon, about space, about our solar system, that the public has not been told. Duke's most recent interviews have been even more explicit. In a 2023 podcast appearance, he was asked if he believed there was a cover-up. His response was, "I don't think it's a cover-up in the conspiracy sense. I think it's institutional paralysis." NASA does not know what to do with information that does not fit the scientific paradigm. They have data, photos, measurements, observations from multiple missions that suggest the moon is far stranger than the simple dead rock narrative. But they cannot release it without fundamentally challenging what people believe about our place in the universe. So they sit on it. It's not malicious, it's cowardice. He was asked what he thinks the structures are. He answered, "I think the moon was inhabited. Not now, at least not obviously, but at some point in the past, something built on the moon. Maybe they built the moon." Inhabited, he explained that he knows how that sounds. When you have stood there and seen what they saw, the question is not, is this possible? The question is, how do we integrate this reality with what we thought we knew? He was asked why he is speaking out now. He replied that he is 89 years old. He has had a good life and a good career. He does not need NASA's approval anymore. He does not care if people think he is crazy. What he cares about is the truth. And the truth is that 12 men have walked on the moon, and all of them experienced things that suggest our understanding of the moon, of space exploration, of our cosmic context is incomplete. We owe it to humanity to share what we know, even if it is uncomfortable, especially if it is uncomfortable. So what is the truth? Is Charles Duke describing real experiences, or has age and time distorted his memories of a mission that happened over 50 years ago? The evidence is complicated. NASA has never released all the photos from Apollo 16. Thousands of images remain unreleased, officially due to technical quality issues, but Duke and other astronauts have consistently claimed that some of their best photos, the ones showing anomalies, are among those never released. Radio transcripts from Apollo missions contained gaps. Sections of the official records say transmission interrupted or technical difficulties. But the astronauts claimed they were having clear conversations during those periods, conversations that were apparently not preserved in the public record. Several former NASA employees have corroborated in vague terms that there were unusual findings from Apollo missions that were set aside for further analysis and never publicly discussed. None have provided specific details, citing non-disclosure agreements and classification restrictions. This corroboration is significant. The rocks brought back from the moon have been studied extensively. They confirm the moon is ancient, geologically dead, and never had an atmosphere. But Duke argues this does not contradict what he saw. He says the structures were not made by moon natives. They were built by something that came from elsewhere. The moon's geology tells us its natural history. What we saw tells us its archaeological history. They are not contradictory. Perhaps most tellingly, Duke's descriptions match in surprising detail anomalies reported by other astronauts from different missions. The sense of presence, the strange light, the feeling of time distortion, the structures. If Duke were simply confabulating or seeking attention, you would expect his claims to be unique. Instead, they corroborate what others have hinted at for decades. The question is not whether Charles Duke is telling the truth as he remembers it. The question is whether his memories accurately reflect what he experienced, or whether the extreme environment of the moon, the stress of the mission, the cosmic radiation, and the sheer alienness of the experience created false memories or misinterpretations. Duke addresses this directly. He has thought about that for 40 years.
He has questioned his own memories. But he was not alone. John Young saw what he saw. They corroborated each other in real time, and their experiences match what other crews reported. At some point, you have to accept that what multiple trained observers report experiencing is probably real, even if it does not fit expectations. Duke is 89 years old. He knows he does not have many years left. He is spending them doing something that would have been unthinkable earlier in his life, challenging the official narrative of the Apollo program. This is not to diminish Apollo's achievements. Duke remains enormously proud of Apollo, of NASA, of what humanity accomplished. But he believes the story we tell about the moon is incomplete. And that incompleteness, he argues, is holding us back. He says we could have continued moon exploration. We could have built bases, sent more missions, and really explored what is there. But we stopped. We stopped after Apollo 17 in 1972, and we have barely been back since. Why? The official reason is budget constraints. But Duke believes the real reason is that the people making decisions realized the moon raised questions they could not answer. It was easier to stop going than to confront what was being found. Duke believes humanity is ready for the truth. People can handle it. We are not children. If there is evidence of ancient structures on the moon, of intelligence that predates us, of technologies we do not understand, that is not terrifying. That is inspiring. That is a challenge worth rising to. But we cannot rise to it while we are being told it doesn't exist. His final message, repeated across Mect. I walked on the moon. I saw things that are not in any official report. I am telling you this because I believe you deserve to know. The moon is not what you have been told. Space is not what you have been told. And if we want to move forward as a species, we need to start with honest accounting of what we have discovered. Whether history will vindicate Charles Duke or dismiss him as a confused elderly man remains to be seen, but his testimony raises profound questions. If he is wrong, why are his descriptions so consistent with other astronauts' hints and admissions? If he is right, what does it mean that humanity has known about ancient lunar structures for over 50 years and done nothing? The moon is still there. The structures Duke describes, if they exist, are still there. The evidence is there. The question is whether we have the courage to look at it honestly and confront what it might mean. Charles Duke walked on the moon 53 years ago. For 40 of those years, he kept silent about what he really saw. Now, at 89, he is telling a truth that most people are not ready to hear. But ready or not, the truth does not change. 12 men walked on the moon, and according to at least one of them, what they found there has been hidden from the rest of us for half a century. The moon is not dead. The moon is not simple. The moon is not what we have been told. And Charles Duke, in the time he has left, is determined to make sure we know it.